I'm Emily Hart, and if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have told you I was living the dream. A small town girl who clawed her way out of a childhood where bills were paid late, and dinner sometimes came from a can, now married to a man everyone else seemed to envy. Ryan Morgan had that effortless charm, easy smile, tailored shirts that fit like they were made for him, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I thought I'd finally stepped into the kind of life I used to imagine while staring at the peeling wallpaper in my mom's rented apartment. But here's the truth. No one tells you some cages are built of gold and silk, and you don't realize you're trapped until the air starts to thin. Ryan's family was different. Old Southern money, sprawling estates, Sunday brunches that looked like magazine spreads. And yet in the middle of all that beauty, there was this invisible wall. They had their traditions, their private jokes, and most of all, their language. Not Spanish this time, but French. Ryan's mother, Claudette, insisted on speaking it with him at the table in the garden, even when I was right there. I'd smile, sip my tea, and pretend not to notice the way her eyes slid over me like I was an unwelcome guest in my own marriage. That's when I decided I wouldn't be an outsider in my own life. I started learning French in secret. At night, when Ryan fell asleep, I'd sit in the glow of my laptop, mouthing new words like they were spells. Je comprends. I understand. I whispered it until I believed it. The language became my key, and I promised myself that one day I'd use it. I didn't know then that the day would come far sooner than I thought, and that what I overheard would not just unlock a door but burn the entire house down. But before I tell you what happened, let me ask, where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments below. I love knowing how far these stories travel, and if you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Back then, I thought learning French was about belonging. I didn't realize it was about survival, because love can blind you, but betrayal sharpens everything into focus. And the night I finally understood every word they were saying was the night I stopped being their outsider and became their biggest threat. Ryan had no idea I was quietly stockpiling knowledge like ammunition. Every time he and Claudette switched into French, I tilted my head just enough to catch the cadence, tucking phrases away until they formed full sentences in my mind. It became my secret power, one that hummed beneath my skin like a live wire. That Sunday morning, I was up before dawn, watching the soft Georgia light spill through the kitchen window. I'd been planning this day for weeks, our first formal brunch at our home since we'd married. The guest list was short, just Ryan and Claudette. But in my mind, it was a chance to prove I wasn't just the girl he married. I belonged here. I'd prepared a menu worthy of the Morgan's standards: fresh croissants from a French bakery in Buckhead, herb-crusted lamb-roasted vegetables, and a strawberry tart with a glaze so perfect it shined like glass. When Ryan walked in fresh from his morning run, he kissed my cheek and told me I looked beautiful. His words were light, but there was something rushed about them, like they were an afterthought. Claudette arrived soon after, draped in a silk scarf that probably cost more than my entire outfit, her perfume saturating the air before she even crossed the threshold. She greeted me with a cool kiss on both cheeks, her eyes already scanning the table as if she were conducting an inspection. We sat. I poured coffee. They slipped into French. Normally, they'd throw me a glance and switch back to English, but not today. Today, the words flowed freely, and for the first time, I understood every syllable. Elle n'a pas de goût, mon fils. Pourquoi laisser Émilie cuisiner pour nous? She has no taste, my son. Why let Émilie cook for us? I kept my hand steady as I set down the coffee pot, the steam warming my face even as my blood ran cold. Ryan's answer came low, but I heard it clearly. Ne t'inquiète pas, maman, je fais la plupart du travail. Elle ne gâchera rien. Don't worry, Mum. I handle most of it. She won't mess anything up. The fork in my hand suddenly felt heavy. My mind raced back to every polite smile, every nod of approval Claudette had given me in the past year. All lies. I'd thought the French lessons would bring me closer to them, now they were slicing me open. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled and asked Ryan if he'd like more sugar. Inside, I was memorizing the moment, the exact curve of his lips as he lied to me, the way Claudette's rings clinked against her coffee cup when she laughed. I knew then this wasn't just about a brunch. This was about power, and I'd just stumbled into the real game they'd been playing all along. Nous devons parler du plan demain, Claudette said suddenly. We need to talk about the plan tomorrow. I froze. Ryan's eyes darted toward me, but Claudette didn't slow down. La maison sur la côte. Elle est à nous si nous arrivons les premiers. The house on the coast. It's ours if we get there first. The words hit me like ice water. I'd heard whispers of a family vacation home and oceanfront property Ryan's late uncle had left in trust to be given to the most deserving. I'd assumed it was just talk, a relic of family gossip. Now I realized it was a prize they'd been scheming to snatch, and I was never meant to know. I wanted to slam my hands on the table to demand they explain themselves, but something inside me, maybe the same instinct that had made me learn French in secret, told me to wait. If I wanted the truth, I couldn't just ask for it. I had to let them keep talking. So I leaned back, lifted my cup, and said, "You two can speak in French if you want. I don't mind." Ryan glanced at me, searching my face for a hint of suspicion. Claudette smirked as if she'd just been given permission to sharpen her knives. And they kept talking. About timing, about making sure I stayed behind, about how I was too busy with my little projects to notice. Each word felt like another thread snapping inside me, but I stayed still, nodding at the right moments, even managing a small laugh when Claudette made a joke she thought I couldn't understand. They didn't know it yet, but in that moment I shifted from being their silent audience to becoming the person who could burn their whole plan down. And I was already thinking about how to do it. By the way, if you've ever been underestimated, if someone smiled in your face while plotting behind your back, tell me in the comments. You'd be surprised how many of us have been there, and your story might be the reminder someone else needs to hear today. That day over coffee and lamb roast, I decided something. They thought I was harmless, but I'd use that to my advantage. If they wanted a game, I was done playing by their rules. From now on, the rules would be mine. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. It wasn't because I couldn't sleep, though my mind had been looping their words like a broken record. It was because I knew I needed to move quickly. The brunch had shown me the truth, but truth alone doesn't win a war. You need proof. You need leverage. I decided to turn what was supposed to be a casual midweek dinner into my next step. Ryan thought I was making his favorite roasted chicken for the two of us, but in my head it was going to be a dress rehearsal for something much bigger. Every detail mattered, the soft lighting, the wine. He couldn't resist the carefully arranged table setting. I wanted him relaxed, comfortable, and talking. By 6, the chicken was in the oven, and the smell was curling through the air like bait. Ryan came home from work, loosened his tie, and grinned at the sight of the bottle of Bordeaux breathing on the counter. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "Just wanted to do something nice for us," I said, keeping my voice light. In truth, I wanted him off guard. People guard their secrets when they sense suspicion. My goal was to make him feel like there was nothing to hide. We sat down, and almost on cue, his phone lit up with a message from Claudette. He angled the screen away, but I caught the name. His fork paused midair, and then he slipped into French without thinking, speaking under his breath as he typed. "Les billets sont confirmés pour jeudi. The tickets are confirmed for Thursday." I acted as if I hadn't heard, cutting into my chicken with deliberate slowness. My heart, however, was slamming against my ribs. Thursday. That was sooner than I'd expected. Something wrong? I asked, meeting his eyes just long enough to make him choose between telling me the truth or lying. He chose the latter. "Just work stuff," he said, waving it off. Dinner went on, but my appetite was gone. I was cataloging everything, his tone, the way his shoulders eased when I didn't press the faint smirk when he looked at his phone again. After dessert, while he was in the shower, I made my move. His laptop sat on the desk in our home office, the screen still lit. I'd memorized his password months ago when he asked me to check his emails for a flight confirmation once Blue Cove 88. I typed it in, and there it was, an open itinerary for 2 departing Thursday morning, destination the coast. 1 ticket in his name, 1 in Claudette's. I took out my phone and snapped photos of every detail, dates, times, booking numbers. Then I searched his email for keywords. That's when I found the thread that changed everything, a back and forth between him and Claudette, discussing ensuring Emily stays occupied and finalizing the transfer paperwork. My fingers trembled, but my mind was ice cold. They weren't just planning to go without me, they were actively making sure I'd be nowhere near the property when they claimed it. When Ryan came out of the shower, I was back in the kitchen rinsing wine glasses as if nothing had happened. He kissed my temple and thanked me for dinner, completely unaware that I now had every detail of his plan in my pocket. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how I'd played it so far. Staying quiet had worked, but soon silence wouldn't be enough. I needed a strategy that would not only stop them, but make sure they could never try something like this again. I remembered something my mother used to say when she was juggling overdue bills. Don't just plug the leak, fix the whole damn pipe. This wasn't just about stopping the trip. It was about taking away the prize they were willing to betray me for. If you've ever been in a situation where you realize someone close to you was planning something behind your back, I want you to think about what you did next. Did you confront them? Did you gather evidence? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might just help someone else make their move. As I drifted towards sleep, the outline of my plan took shape. First, I'd let them think I was oblivious. Second, I'd find a way to reach the property's true owner before they did. And third, I'd make sure that when the dust settled, I was the one standing in the winner's circle. They'd made a mistake thinking I was too busy with my little projects to notice. Now those projects were about to become the most important mission of my life. 2 days later, the moment arrived when the veneer cracked. It wasn't planned. Sometimes the truth just falls into your lap when you least expect it. Ryan had invited Claudette over again, this time for afternoon tea. I was in the kitchen arranging pastries on a tiered stand when I heard the front door open and her sharp-clipped heels strike the hardwood. I stayed quiet, my hands steadying a plate that didn't need steadying. From the living room, their voices rose and fell in French. This time I didn't have to strain. Tu es sûr qu'elle ne posera pas de questions? Claudette's voice was low but urgent. Are you sure she won't ask questions? Ryan chuckled softly. Elle est trop absorbée par ses designs. Elle ne remarquera rien. She's too wrapped up in her designs. She won't notice a thing. That single sentence felt like a slap. I'd spent nights poring over client work to help pay for his dreams, and he was using my dedication as proof of my ignorance. I wiped my hands on a towel, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the edge of the kitchen. I positioned myself just out of sight, but close enough for my phone's voice memo app to capture everything. La maison vaut des millions, Claudette continued. The house is worth millions. On la rénove, on la vend, et on est libre. We fix it up, sell it, and we're free. My stomach tightened. Free from me. That's what they meant. This wasn't just greed. It was an escape plan. I wanted to burst in to shatter their smug expressions, but my instincts told me to wait. If I revealed my hand too soon, I'd lose the element of surprise. Ryan shifted the topic, asking about logistics, flight times, who would hold the keys, how soon the renovations could start. Claudette reminded him they had to be first to the property before another family member made a claim. I caught the name Uncle Charles and a note of irritation in her voice, as if this was a race and he was their only competition. When the conversation lulled, I stepped in with a tray of tea as if I'd heard nothing. Claudette pasted on her society smile. Emily, this looks lovely, she said in English. Thank you, I replied, placing a cup in front of her. My own smile felt carved from stone. I wanted today to be special. We sipped tea and nibbled pastries in an awkward choreography, the kind of false pleasantries that make your jaw ache. Ryan talked about a work trip he had coming up, one I now knew was just days away. Claudette nodded along, adding vague comments about how travel was good for business. Inside, I was seething. I could feel the heat climbing my neck, the tightness in my chest. But I'd grown up swallowing feelings that didn't serve me in the moment, and that skill was about to become my greatest weapon. When Claudette excused herself to the powder room, Ryan stepped into the kitchen to refill the teapot. That's when I made my move. I glanced at the phone he'd left on the counter. The screen was still unlocked. With my heart thudding in my ears, I opened his email and quickly scrolled to find the most recent thread with Claudette. There it was, again, flight confirmations, property details, and even a scanned copy of what looked like a preliminary transfer form. I forwarded the entire thread to my own email, then deleted the sent record from his account. By the time he returned with the teapot, I was calmly buttering a scone. For the rest of the afternoon, I kept my demeanor light. I laughed at Claudette's polished anecdotes, asked Ryan polite questions about his upcoming project, and played the role of the doting wife so convincingly I almost believed it myself. But under that surface, my plan was crystallizing. They thought they were days away from securing the house and erasing me from the equation. I was going to make sure that when they showed up, the door would already be locked and the keys would be in my pocket. And if you've ever had to smile at someone while holding on to a secret that could blow their world apart, you know exactly how that moment feels. Tell me in the comments, what's the hardest secret you've ever kept until the timing was right? That day I learned that patience isn't passive. It's the art of waiting with purpose, of letting your opponent believe they've won until it's too late for them to change course. By the time Claudette's car pulled out of our driveway, I knew exactly what my next step would be. And I also knew the game they started, I was going to finish it. The night after Claudette's visit, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning like a wheel that wouldn't stop. I'd crossed the threshold. This was no longer about simply catching them in the act. This was about taking control of the entire game board. But to do that, I needed more than stolen emails and half-heard conversations. I needed something undeniable, something that could not be spun or dismissed. That something would come from the source himself, Uncle Charles. I knew it was risky. I didn't know the man well. I'd only met him twice, once at our wedding, and once at a 4th of July barbecue where he wore a straw hat and told me the story of how the coastal house came into the family. He'd mentioned it was meant for the right kind of person, someone who'd love it, not just see dollar signs. Even then, Claudette had rolled her eyes. I figured if anyone could see through their act, it would be him. But I couldn't just call out of nowhere without raising alarms. I needed a pretext, something that would feel casual but still open the door to a deeper conversation. That's when I remembered Ryan's unlocked phone from the afternoon tea. While he was distracted that day, I'd noticed Charles's number stored under Uncle C. I'd memorized it. Now, with my heart pounding, I dialed from my own phone, pacing the kitchen in the dark. He answered on the third ring, his voice warm but cautious. "Emily, everything all right?" "Yes," I said, forcing a light tone. "I was just thinking about that story you told me at the barbecue about the house. I can't stop picturing it." He chuckled softly. "Ah, she's a beauty. I imagine Ryan's been talking about it. I hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Sort of," I said carefully. "Mostly I've heard bits and pieces. But I did want to ask, what makes someone the right kind of person for a place like that?" The line went quiet for a moment. "It's someone who sees it as a home, not a cash grab," he said finally. "Someone who'd protect it. Why?" I took a breath, debating whether to spill everything right then. My instinct told me it was too soon. I needed to collect every piece of the puzzle first. No reason I lied, just curious. We chatted a bit more about nothing in particular before hanging up, but his words stayed with me. Someone who'd protect it. That was my in. The next day, I started building my case like a trial lawyer. I organized every scrap of evidence, the recordings on my phone, the forwarded emails, even notes about what I'd overheard and when. I labeled each file, dated it, and stored copies on a flash drive I kept in my purse. If they decided to make a preemptive move against me, I could walk straight to Uncle Charles with an ironclad narrative. Ryan, meanwhile, was acting as if everything was perfectly normal. He kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted me about dinner plans, and even suggested we do something fun that weekend. It was almost laughable, his confidence in my ignorance. That Friday evening, we were sitting on the porch, sipping wine, when he casually mentioned he'd be out of town for 2 days next week. I looked at him over the rim of my glass and smiled. "Work again." "Yeah," he said easily. "Client thing, nothing big." Inside, I was screaming. Out loud, I said, "Well, I hope it goes well. And let me ask you, have you ever had to sit across from someone who was lying straight to your face while you already knew the truth? Drop it in the comments because I want to hear how you handled it. Did you call them out, or did you let them dig their own grave?" That night, I decided I wasn't just going to stop them from getting the house. I was going to position myself so that when the decision was made, I was the only logical choice. If Charles thought I was the one who truly valued it, the rest would fall into place. The irony was they were making it easier for me. Every smug glance, every whispered plan, every careless detail they let slip, it was all fuel for the fire I was building. They thought I was too busy with my little projects to notice, but soon they were going to find out that my real project was them. Saturday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, the kind of warm, honeyed glow that should have meant pancakes and a slow start. Instead, I felt like I was gearing up for a mission. I'd spent half the night refining my plan, replaying Uncle Charles's words, someone who'd protect it, until they became both a mantra and a weapon. Ryan had gone for an early run, leaving his phone charging on the kitchen counter. I stood there staring at it, my reflection warped in the black screen. I didn't need more evidence, at least not to prove what I already knew, but every scrap mattered. I unlocked it using the code I'd long since memorized, scrolled through his messages, and found a new thread from Claudette. "We should move sooner. Charles has been talking to people." Ryan's reply, "Relax, she has no clue. Flights are set." The arrogance in that one sentence made my jaw tighten. I copied the entire exchange and sent it to my own email, deleting the sent message record again. The satisfaction was almost immediate, another brick in the wall I was building around my case. When he returned, sweat-dripping smile casual, I was already in the garden trimming the rosemary bush. "Smells amazing," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I resisted the urge to flinch. The rest of the day I played my role to perfection. I made lunch, asked him about work, even listened to him ramble about a potential new investment. All the while, I was memorizing his tells, the way he tapped his fingers on the armrest when he was holding back information, how his eyes flicked to the left when he told a partial truth. By evening, I was ready to push a little harder. Over dinner, I mentioned, I've been thinking about making a trip to the coast sometime, just to get away, clear my head." He froze for a fraction of a second before recovering. "That sounds nice," he said, voice too casual. "Maybe later this year." I filed that reaction away. The house was clearly on his mind, and the thought of me being anywhere near it before he could stake his claim rattled him. After dinner, while he was distracted with a basketball game on TV, I slipped into the office and checked the flash drive where I'd stored all my evidence. Every file was there, neatly organized. I even added a backup to a cloud account under a name only I knew. If they somehow tried to erase my physical copies, I'd still have everything. Let me ask you something. If you were in my position, would you confront them now, or would you keep building your case? I want to know because sometimes the smartest move is the one that requires the most patience, and hearing your take might just confirm what I already suspect. That night, I sat on the porch alone, the air thick with the scent of jasmine. I thought about how a year ago I would have told myself to just be nice and hope for the best. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood that niceness is a tool, not a virtue, at least not when you're dealing with people who are ready to cut you out of your own life. I was done playing their game as the naive newcomer. Now, every smile I gave them, every nod, every seemingly innocent question, it all had a purpose. The real trick was making them believe I was still on the outside of their little circle. What they didn't realize was that I'd already stepped inside. I was in their conversations, their inboxes, their travel plans, and soon I'd be standing in the doorway of the very house they were so desperate to take, holding the keys with no intention of letting them in. By Monday morning, the air between Ryan and me had settled into that false peace that always comes before a storm. He was humming while making coffee, scrolling through his phone like any other day, but I could feel the undercurrent. He was counting down to something. I already knew what it was: Thursday's flight with Claudette, and that meant I had only 3 full days to turn the tide completely. While he was in the shower, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, not for work, but to map out my next moves. Step 1, secure a direct conversation with Uncle Charles without Ryan or Claudette knowing. Step 2, make sure Charles saw me not just as Ryan's wife, but as the person who embodied his vision for the coastal house. Step 3, sabotage their trip without leaving fingerprints. The opportunity for step 1 came faster than I expected. Around mid-morning, Ryan left for an off-site meeting, and I dialed Charles's number before I could overthink it. "Emily," he said warmly, "this is a nice surprise." I didn't waste time. "I know you value that house, Charles. You've probably made your decision about who should have it. But before you do, I need to tell you something off the record." He was silent for a beat, then go on. I told him everything, at least the parts I could share without revealing how deep my access to their communications went. I told him how Ryan and Claudette had been planning to get there first, how they'd been discussing renovations and selling it for profit, how they'd dismissed me as too busy with my little projects to notice. Charles's voice hardened. That's not what I had in mind when I thought about deserving. I let the weight of his words sit there. I just wanted you to know where I stand. If I were ever lucky enough to have that house, I wouldn't flip it. I'd keep it in the family. I'd protect it. When we hung up, I felt a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't a promise, but it was a seed, and I knew how to make seeds grow. That afternoon, I turned my attention to step 3, sabotage. My mind went to the flight booking confirmation I'd already copied. It would take only a few clicks to shift their itinerary, just enough to throw them off. The key was subtlety. They couldn't suspect me outright. If they did, the whole plan would unravel. That evening, Ryan was distracted pacing the living room while texting someone, no doubt Claudette. I played the doting spouse, asking if he wanted tea if he'd eaten enough dinner. He waved me off, murmuring about details and timing. I pretended to watch TV, but in reality I was watching him. Every restless glance at his phone, every sigh, it all told me the same thing: they were getting anxious. Good. Later that night, when he finally went to bed, I stayed up under the guise of finishing a work project. The moment his breathing settled into the deep, steady rhythm of sleep, I slipped into the office, logged into the airline's website, using his saved credentials, and nudged their departure forward by a full day. Not canceled, just moved. Enough to create chaos without an obvious trail. By the time I shut down the computer, the house was silent. But in my chest, my pulse was loud enough to drown out the crickets outside. And here's where I want your take: if you had the power to derail someone's scheme without them ever knowing it was you, would you use it, or would you let them walk into their own disaster untouched? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious which path you'd choose. The next morning, I woke with the strange calm that comes when you know the board is set in your favor. They thought they were closing in on their prize. What they didn't know was that I'd already taken the first step to make sure the prize would never be theirs. Tuesday morning carried that heavy electric stillness like the air before a summer storm. Ryan was moving through the kitchen with unusual precision, coffee-brewed briefcase, packed phone constantly in his hand. I could almost hear the clock ticking in his head as he prepared for Thursday. But what he didn't know was that his countdown had already shifted. I decided to keep the pressure low to let him feel comfortable. That's when people make mistakes. They stop guarding their words. Over breakfast, I asked casually, "So you're still heading out Thursday morning?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "Yep, early flight. Won't be gone long." I stirred my tea, masking my satisfaction. Early flight, if only he knew. That afternoon, I set the stage for my next move. Uncle Charles had been on my mind since our last conversation. He'd sounded genuinely concerned about what I'd told him, but concern wasn't enough. I needed him invested. I called him again, framing it as a follow-up to thank him for listening. We ended up talking for nearly an hour, not just about the house, but about family responsibility and legacy. I didn't push. I let him arrive at his own conclusions about who in this family truly fit those values. By the end of the call, he said, "Emily, if half of what you've told me is true, then they've got no business being anywhere near that place." The seed I'd planted was growing. When Ryan came home that evening, I could sense the shift in him. He was on edge, snapping at small things: traffic and email from work, even the way the mail was stacked on the counter. Claudette must have been in his ear. I almost smiled. The more pressure they felt, the more likely they were to slip. After dinner, I sat at my desk working while Ryan took a call in the next room. I didn't even have to try hard to hear him. "We just need to get there first, that's it. She doesn't know a thing," he said in French. I muted my laptop, letting every word etch itself into memory. Claudette's muffled voice answered something about making sure Emily's distracted. Ryan agreed without hesitation. It was almost too easy. I knew then that tomorrow, Wednesday, would be critical. They'd be in full prep mode for their supposed Thursday trip, completely unaware that their flights were no longer what they thought. I'd be free to make my final, most decisive move without interference. Before bed, I reviewed my evidence one last time, ensuring my backups were secure. Every recording, every email, every note, it was all ready to be handed to Charles if needed. As I shut off the lamp, I felt that same strange calm I'd felt the night I altered their flights. The board was mine. But calm doesn't mean soft. I was ready for whatever came next. If you've ever been in a situation where you knew more than the people around you and you had to keep it to yourself to make your plan work, how did you handle it? I'd love to hear in the comments, because that quiet kind of power, it changes you. Tomorrow, the pieces would start moving fast, and by the time they realized it, checkmate would already be on the board. Wednesday morning felt different, not because the sky was any darker or the air any heavier, but because I knew by this time tomorrow, everything would start to unravel for Ryan and Claudette. He was in the kitchen early, pacing between the coffee pot and the counter, rattling off a mental checklist under his breath. I sat at the table watching him like I might watch a stranger. The man who once told me we'd build a life together was now nervously planning how to leave me behind. The irony was that I'd already built an exit plan of my own, and his name wasn't on it. When he finally left for work, I had the house to myself. My first move of the day was to call Uncle Charles. I kept my tone steady, my words deliberate. "I think it's time you heard it for yourself," I told him. Within minutes, I was sending over the clearest recordings, Claudette calling the house worth millions, Ryan agreeing they'd sell it and be free, their casual dismissal of me as a distraction. I didn't need to add commentary. Their own words condemned them. Charles listened in silence. When he spoke again, there was steel in his voice. I'll take care of it. Don't you worry. That was my green light. Next, I checked the airline's site again. Their flights were still set for Friday, right where I'd moved them. It gave me a cushion, a clean window to reach the house first if needed. But just to be safe, I added a second layer of insurance. I booked my own ticket for Thursday morning, direct to the coastal airport closest to the property. It wasn't cheap, but freedom rarely is. By early afternoon, I'd packed a discreet overnight bag and stored it in the trunk of my car. The sight of it sitting there felt like the embodiment of every lesson I'd learned: always be ready to move when the moment comes. When Ryan came home that evening, he was jittery on edge in a way he couldn't mask. Busy day, I asked lightly. Just a lot going on, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. I let the silence hang long enough for him to feel it. Then I smiled as if I didn't notice the cracks forming. That's when he relaxed, just a fraction, and said, "After tomorrow, everything will fall into place." He didn't realize how right he was. As I cleared the dishes, my mind was already running the sequence of tomorrow's moves. If Charles called me early enough, I could be at the house before sunset. If not, I'd still arrive ahead of them, giving me the advantage no matter what. But here's the thing. What I didn't know yet was just how far Charles was willing to go once he heard those recordings. That uncertainty made the air hum with tension. And this is where I'm going to tell you something important. What happens next will change everything. It's the kind of turn you don't see coming, the kind that flips the whole board in one move. You might think you know how this ends, but trust me, you don't. Stay with me, because tomorrow isn't just the day their plan collapses. It's the day I stop playing defense for good. That night, as I lay in bed beside Ryan, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, I thought about all the quiet moments that had led here, the late nights learning French, the careful smiles, the calculated patience. It all came down to the next 24 hours. Tomorrow the storm would break, and I'd be standing exactly where I needed to be when it did. Thursday began with a sky so clear it almost mocked me, like the universe wanted to see if I'd lose my nerve under the weight of calm. But calm was my weapon now. I'd been building to this day for weeks, and the moment to strike had arrived. Ryan was still asleep when I slipped out of bed. I padded quietly into the kitchen, turned off the alarm on his phone, and set it face down on the counter. If he overslept, all the better. I showered, dressed in jeans and a crisp white shirt, nothing flashy but sharp enough to walk into any meeting with authority. My overnight bag, already in the trunk, felt heavier with the knowledge of what I was about to do. By 6:45 a.m., I was in my car, the engine purring low as I backed out of the driveway. I drove with the kind of focus you only get when adrenaline and purpose mix in equal parts. My ticket was for the 8:10 flight direct to the small coastal airport. If everything went right, I'd be at the house before lunch. Halfway to the airport, my phone buzzed. It was Uncle Charles. "Emily," he said without preamble. "I listened to those recordings again this morning. I've made my decision." His voice was firm, resolute. "The house is yours. I'm putting it in writing today." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the corners of my mouth curving into something between relief and victory. "Thank you, Charles. You don't know what this means to me." "Oh, I do," he said. "I know exactly what it means." When I landed, I rented a small SUV, something sturdy enough to handle the winding road up the bluff. The closer I got, the more the ocean came into view, a shimmering expanse of blue, meeting the sky in a perfect horizon. And then there it was, the house. 2 stories of weathered gray wood and white trim wraparound porch, catching the sunlight like a smile. I parked out front and stepped onto the porch. The key Charles had couriered to me the night before slid into the lock as if it had been waiting for me all along. The door opened to a rush of cool, salted air and the quiet creak of floorboards that felt like a welcome. I walked through each room, slowly letting my fingertips graze the banister, the kitchen counters, the wide window frames. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Proof that no matter what Ryan and Claudette had tried to strip from me, I could still claim something that was mine wholly and without apology. Around noon, my phone lit up. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring once-twice before answering. "Where are you?" His voice was tight-rushed. In the background, I could hear muffled airport announcements. "Oh, I'm just taking a little time for myself," I said lightly. "You seemed busy, so I figured you wouldn't mind." There was a beat of silence before Claudette's voice cut in sharp as glass. "You changed our flights, didn't you?" I smiled, standing at the porch, railing the ocean wind, tangling my hair. If by changed you mean moved them so you'd have more time to think about your choices, then yes, I did. Ryan jumped in his tone, almost pleading now. Emily, this isn't what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I interrupted. Charles knows. He's giving me the house. And I'm done playing wife to a man who was planning his exit while sitting at my table. The line went dead silent except for their breathing heavy, uneven, as if they'd both run out of words at the same time. Standing there with the waves crashing below, I realized something winning didn't always mean loud celebrations or public triumphs. Sometimes it was just the quiet, undeniable knowledge that you'd been underestimated, and you'd turned that into your sharpest blade. For a long moment, the only sound on the line was the wind off the ocean whipping around me. I could almost picture them, Ryan clutching his phone at the airport gate, Claudette leaning in over his shoulder, both scrambling for words. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice lower, measured like he thought he could still negotiate. Emily, let's talk about this face to face. We can work it out. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Work it out. You mean convince me that the recordings I have of you and Claudette plotting to sell the house and ditch me are some kind of misunderstanding? You don't get to rewrite this story, Ryan. Not anymore. Claudette's voice sliced in, dripping with that familiar condescension. You've overstepped. That property is family business. I am family, I said, letting my tone turn icy. Or at least I was until you made it clear that in your version of family, I'm expendable. Charles doesn't see it that way. That hit home. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. Ryan tried again. You blindsided us. I stepped inside the house, letting my heels click deliberately against the hardwood floor so the sound carried through the phone. That's rich, coming from the man who's been lying to my face for weeks. I learned a long time ago that if someone plans to cut you out, the smartest move is to get ahead of them. And I did. I'm not apologizing for that. There was a muffled argument between them, their voices rising in quick bursts of French. I understood every word now, accusations, panic, the frantic realization that their plan had crumbled. It was almost satisfying to let them know I could hear it all. Oh, by the way, I said when there was a pause, your little side conversations. The ones you thought I couldn't understand, I've been fluent for months. Every insult, every plan, every time you called me a distraction, I heard it, and I'll never forget it. Ryan went quiet. Then almost in a whisper, you learned French, for me. The ache that question might have caused me weeks ago was gone. No, Ryan, I learned it for us. I wanted to be part of your world, but now I see it was only your world and I was never meant to belong. So I'm done trying. I let the silence stretch until it was heavy enough to make them squirm. Then I delivered the final cut. Charles has already signed over the house. It's mine. I've changed the locks. You're not welcome here. Claudette exploded, her voice sharp and desperate, but I'd already pulled the phone away from my ear. Her words faded into the background, replaced by the steady sound of waves crashing against the shore below. And tell me, have you ever had that moment when you realized you finally held all the power in a situation that used to crush you? If you have, you know how intoxicating it is. I ended the call without another word. No dramatic goodbye, no parting insults, just the clean final click of a line going dead. Leaning against the doorframe, I took a deep breath and looked around the space. The late afternoon sun was spilling in through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air like tiny sparks. This wasn't just a victory, it was liberation. I knew they'd keep trying. People like Ryan and Claudette didn't just surrender, but it didn't matter. I was already 10 steps ahead, and this time there was no way back for them. The first night in the coastal house was quieter than I'd imagined. No city noise, no hum of traffic, just the steady pulse of waves and the occasional cry of a gull. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the empty living room, sipping coffee from a chipped mug I'd found in one of the kitchen cabinets. The air smelled faintly of salt and pine, and for the first time in weeks, my shoulders began to unclench. By morning, the sunlight poured through the big front windows, spilling across the hardwood floors in golden ribbons. I opened every curtain, every window, letting the house breathe. It felt like a living thing waking up from a long sleep, and I couldn't help but feel the same. That day I made a slow circuit of each room, notebook in hand, not just to plan decor or repairs, but to decide how I wanted this space to feel. This wasn't about flipping a property for profit, it was about staking a claim, about putting roots into a place that had almost been stolen out from under me. In the kitchen, I imagined the smell of fresh bread baking. In the upstairs bedroom with the wide ocean view, I pictured a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, a book on the nightstand, the kind of room that tells you you're safe the moment you walk in. And as I moved from space to space, I thought about the other thing this house represented: proof. Proof that patience, calculation, and the courage to act at the right time could turn the tables completely. I was mid-thought when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: enjoy it while you can. No signature, but I didn't need one. Claudette's brand of venom had a distinct sting. I set the phone down and smiled. The old me might have fired back immediately. The new me knew better. Every time they reached out, they were showing their hand-fear, frustration, the inability to let go. Instead of replying, I walked out onto the wraparound porch, letting the wind whip my hair back. The ocean stretched out in front of me, endless and unbothered by whatever storms people like Ryan and Claudette thought they could stir up. That afternoon, I drove into the small nearby town, stopping at a local hardware store for paint samples and a few basic tools. The cashier, a kind-faced man with a drawl that reminded me of home, asked if I was fixing up the old Morgan place. Yes, I said, but not flipping it. He grinned like that answer meant something to him. When I returned to the house, I set to work painting the guest room a soft sea glass green. It wasn't about the color so much as the act itself. Every brushstroke felt like a declaration. I'm here. I'm staying. And I want to know, if you were handed a fresh start like this, what would you do first? Would you renovate, travel, open the door to guests? Tell me in the comments. Your answers might inspire more than you think. By the time the sun set, the room was transformed. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the faint scent of new paint, and realized that I didn't feel like I was hiding here. I felt like I was claiming what was rightfully mine. Somewhere out there, Ryan and Claudette were scrambling, trying to figure out their next move. But here in this quiet, light-filled house, I knew exactly what mine would be: keep building. Not just walls and rooms, but a life so solid they could never touch it again. By the third day in the coastal house, I'd settled into a rhythm that felt almost dangerous in its calm. Morning coffee on the porch, afternoons painting or arranging furniture, evenings walking the bluff trails until the sun dipped into the water. On the surface, it looked like I'd escaped the chaos. In truth, I was just starting the next phase, my answer to every insult, every whispered plan to erase me. It began with the photos. I'd take them casually, me barefoot on the porch with a steaming mug, the ocean framed perfectly behind me. The fireplace lit in the evening flames, casting a warm glow across the wooden beams. The view from the upstairs window when the sky turned lavender at dusk. Then, without a single caption beyond home, I sent them to Ryan and Claudette. No explanation, no demands, just proof of where I was and what I had. The first reply came from Ryan. Why are you doing this? I didn't respond. Claudette's came minutes later. That house was never meant for you. I sent back another photo, a close-up of the front door, my hand turning the new key in the lock. It is now. Every time they tried to provoke me, I answered with another picture. It wasn't petty for the sake of pettiness, it was strategy. They thrived on control, on being the ones to dictate the narrative. By staying calm and showing them the one thing they couldn't take back, I was flipping the power dynamic entirely. One evening, as the sky bled orange over the water, my phone rang. No caller ID, I answered anyway. Ryan's voice was tight, almost breathless. You don't have to keep this up. We can talk. Talk, I let the word hang. We stopped talking the moment you decided to cut me out of your future. It wasn't like that. Then what was it, Ryan? Because I have recordings that say otherwise. And every time you call me now, I hear the panic in your voice. You're not worried about me. You're worried about what losing means for you. Silence, then a faint click as the call disconnected. I went back to the porch, the evening air cool against my skin. I thought about how easy it would have been to let my anger take the wheel, to shout, to curse, to tell them exactly what I thought of them. But subtlety, I was learning, could be just as devastating. The messages continued for days, accusations, veiled threats, even half-hearted attempts at guilt. I answered none of them directly. Instead, I posted a photo of the freshly painted guest room with the caption, "Ready for visitors," or a shot of the bluff trail with my favorite place to think. It was a language they understood, possession without apology. And tell me, if you had the chance to send a message without saying a single word, what would it be? Sometimes silence paired with the right image says more than any argument could. Share it in the comments. I want to hear your version. By the end of the week, I could feel the shift. Their messages came less often, the tone less fiery and more resigned. They were starting to understand I wasn't coming back and I wasn't giving this up. And yet I knew better than to believe they were done. People like Ryan and Claudette didn't fade quietly. They waited, plotted, circled back, which meant I had to be ready for the next move. What I didn't know yet was that their next move would come sooner than I thought, and it would be bold enough to make me wonder if they'd finally lost all sense of caution. 3 days later, I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. It was still early fog rolling in from the ocean, the world outside my bedroom window blurred into soft grays and whites. My first thought was delivery, maybe groceries. But the crunch of footsteps on the porch told me otherwise. Slow, purposeful, like someone who wasn't in a hurry to knock. I slipped on my robe and padded to the front door, phone in hand. Through the side window I saw Ryan, alone, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. I didn't open the door right away. "You can at least say good morning," he called, voice low. I cracked the door an inch. "What do you want?" "To talk." His eyes flicked over my shoulder, scanning the interior like he was cataloging everything I'd done to his house. I thought maybe we could find a way forward. I almost laughed. Forward. "The last time we spoke, you told me I was nothing without you." He shifted, pulling something from his pocket. A folded piece of paper. "This is a new agreement. You keep the house, but—" I cut him off. "But you get the rest. The investments, the shares, the account balances. Right?" His jaw tightened. "Emily, be reasonable. You're not cut out for—" "Running my own life." I opened the door wider, just enough for him to see the camera on the hallway table still recording from the moment I spotted his car. "You should know by now I don't sign anything I haven't read, and had my lawyer read twice." The flash of irritation in his eyes told me everything. This wasn't about compromise, it was about salvaging what he could before I bled him dry in court. "I didn't want it to get ugly," he said. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Then maybe you shouldn't have built your marriage on lies." For a moment we just stood there, the ocean rumbling in the distance. Then he shoved the paper back into his pocket and stepped off the porch. No goodbye, no threat, just retreat. I locked the door and leaned against it, my pulse pounding. I'd been bracing for this kind of confrontation, but there was something in his eyes, desperation maybe, that told me the fight wasn't over. 2 hours later, my suspicion was confirmed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox before noon. Alone." I should have ignored it. Every instinct told me it was bait, but curiosity won. The mailbox was at the end of the gravel drive, right where it met the road. Inside was a single flash drive, no note. Back in the safety of my kitchen, I plugged it into my laptop. A video opened, grainy, obviously recorded without the subject's knowledge. Ryan and Claudette sitting in a restaurant booth, leaning close. "She'll fold," Claudette was saying, stirring her coffee. "We'll hit her from 2 sides, financial pressure and public embarrassment. No one walks away from both." Ryan nodded. "And if she doesn't?" Claudette's smile was thin. "Then we make sure she regrets every minute of her little rebellion." My hands clenched on the table. They were still plotting, still convinced I could be cornered. But whoever sent me this, someone inside their circle, had just given me the edge I needed. And here's the thing, sometimes the people trying to destroy you hand you the very weapon that ends them. I knew exactly what to do next, but I also knew this final move had to be timed perfectly. One mistake and they'd spin the story in their favor before I even left the gate. The storm wasn't over, but I'd just been handed the lightning. The flash drive sat next to my coffee cup like a ticking clock. I knew I had 2 choices: treat it as proof and go quietly through the legal system, or turn it into a spotlight that would burn their carefully curated lives to ash. I chose the latter. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting across from my attorney, Lisa, in her sunlit office overlooking Main Street. She didn't even finish the video before leaning back in her chair, eyebrows raised. "Emily, this isn't just leverage. This is a checkmate. We can go for full asset disclosure, and with the public interest this will generate, they'll settle rather than drag this through open court." That's when the idea hit me: not just settle, but control the narrative. For too long, Claudette and Ryan had been the storytellers, painting me as ungrateful, unstable, unworthy. I was going to take the pen out of their hands. We scheduled a press meeting, not in some stuffy legal setting, but at a local charity gala I had quietly supported for years. Cameras would already be there. The guest list included reporters from regional outlets. And most importantly, Claudette herself was on the board. The night of the gala, I wore black. Not mourning, black power black. The kind that absorbs light and reflects nothing but intent. I waited until Claudette finished her opening remarks, her pearl necklace gleaming under the chandeliers. Then I stepped up to the mic. Before we begin tonight's auction, I'd like to share something. It's about truth and choice. The room stilled. I could feel every set of eyes on me, including hers. I held up the flash drive. This little piece of plastic holds a conversation. Not just any conversation, a conversation about destroying someone's reputation, about ensuring they regret every minute of their rebellion. I paused, letting the words settle. That someone is me. Gasps, whispers. Claudette's face remained frozen, but her knuckles whitened against the back of her chair. I was told I didn't belong, that I'd fold under pressure. But here's the thing, when you've survived worse, betrayal just becomes fuel. Lisa, standing in the back, gave the signal. The projector flickered to life, playing the grainy footage for everyone to see. Claudette's voice echoed through the ballroom. We make sure she regrets every minute of her little rebellion. When the clip ended, the silence was suffocating. Then the questions started shouted, overlapping, feeding off each other. I didn't answer them. I didn't need to. I simply said I won't be silenced, and I won't be broken. Then I walked away from the mic, leaving the chaos behind me. By the time I reached home, my phone was exploding calls from mutual friends, messages from strangers, thanking me for speaking up, news alerts with headlines like Southern Socialite Exposed in Family Plot Scandal. The narrative had shifted, and there was no going back. 2 days later, Ryan's lawyer called. Full settlement. House investments accounts. They just want you to sign a non-disclosure about the footage. I laughed long and hard. No deal. That footage isn't just my protection, it's my freedom. When the paperwork finally came through without the gag clause, I knew I'd won, not just in court, but in reclaiming my own story. And that's the lesson here. Sometimes walking away quietly feels like the safer choice. But if you want true freedom, you have to make noise enough that the walls they built around you crumble for everyone to see. I stood on my porch that evening, watching the sun sink into the horizon, waves crashing against the shore below. For the first time in years, I breathed without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing on my chest. The storm was over, but I'd carry the lightning forever. If you've made it this far, you already know the power of owning your story. I've got another one different twist, same kind of fight that I think you'll want to hear. Click over when you're ready, because trust me, the next one, it'll make your jaw drop. By the time I stood in that quiet kitchen, the morning sun bleeding gold through the curtains, Ryan was gone. Not just out the door, but out of my life completely, irreversibly. I had no tears left for him, no lingering ache for the life we'd built, because that life had been an illusion crafted to keep me small. What I felt instead was air, clean, weightless air filling my lungs for the first time in years. I moved back to the little cottage I'd bought long before Ryan, the one with the chipped blue shutters and the wild garden in the back. Every morning I'd step outside with my coffee and listen to the world waking up, the hum of bees, the rustle of leaves, the sound of my own breath, steady and unhurried. I didn't need anyone translating the language of my life for me anymore. I was fluent in my own voice. The real victory wasn't in catching him or in the chaos that followed. It was in reclaiming myself. Walking away didn't make me weaker. It made me the author of my own story. And if you take nothing else from mine, let it be this: silence is powerful, but speaking up, speaking your truth, is freedom. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. And if this story stirred something in you, share it, because you never know who needs to hear it today. And when you're ready, there's another story waiting, one that just might change how you see everything.